From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano live a mere 3.5 hours before the MLB trade deadline, and the Orioles have already made a splash on this trade deadline day, dealing Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers to the Miami Marlins in exchange for left-handed pitcher Trevor Rogers. If you're joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, give us a like, a thumbs up, comment along. If you're listening to us after the fact, write us a good review. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in on this Tuesday, and I'm going to break down this trade from every angle because it is certainly surprising. The Orioles already made a couple moves on Friday. They already traded for right-handed starter Zach Eflin. They already traded for reliever Seranthony Dominguez and outfielder Christian Pache. But those deals were not nearly as surprising as this one. They sent out Austin Hayes in that deal with the Phillies. That was perhaps the most notable departure until today, where they send Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers to Miami in exchange for the 2021 All-Star Trevor Rogers, who is in the midst of a very, very down season for Miami. I'm going to break this trade down because it's surprising for a lot of reasons. The 4.53 ERA from Trevor Rogers is something that jumps off the table for you. He's 2-9 so far this season. Wins are not an important stat in today's game. 105 1/3 innings pitched so far this season. Really peaked in his career with the 2.64 ERA in that all-star season in 2021 when he was just 23 years old. Things I like about Trevor Rogers: he is a left-handed starter. He is under team control through the 2026 season. So the Orioles are getting still a young 26-year-old left-handed starter who is under team control for the next couple years. Those guys are hard to find, and they're hard to trade for. The reason the Orioles were able to get Trevor Rogers is because this has been somewhat of a disaster season in 21 starts for Trevor Rogers. If you haven't yet seen his StatCast page and you are still digesting lunch, I wouldn't necessarily suggest it. It is covered with blue. Pitching run value, according to StatCast, is in the second percentile, 17th percentile in expected ERA, 17th in expected batting average, does not throw the ball very hard, similar to Zach Eflin, 16th percentile in fastball velo, gets a lot of ground balls, 70th percentile according to StatCast in that category. And he's just not nearly as effective as he has been in previous seasons, and not even close to as effective as he was in 2021. That doesn't mean that he doesn't bring anything to the table. The Orioles made this move for a reason. They expect Trevor Rogers to be a starter, at least in this rotation, for the second half of the season, and hopefully for years to come. But it is a steep price to be giving up your number 5 prospect in Connor Norby, somebody who was already on the big league roster, somebody who was contributing to this big league team, and outfielder Kyle Stowers, who has contributed to this team for 3 seasons now. Granted, in a limited role, really only filling in when there's a case of an injury, when Heston Kjerstad has needed some time back in the minors. Kyle Stowers has been valuable in that role, but to give up both Stowers and Norby in exchange for Trevor Rogers felt very, very steep. And when you look at it holistically, you add in the trade that they made for Zach Eflin, where they gave up 3 recently drafted prospects: pitcher Jackson Baumeister, infielder Mac Horvath, outfielder Matthew Etzel. I thought that was a good deal because you're giving away guys that are not going to impact your 2024 playoff run, that are not probably going to impact your 2025 team. So you're really borrowing from the future, the far away future. This is borrowing a little bit more from the present, not as much as Austin Hayes. Neither of these guys is as big a contributor as Austin Hayes, who was dealt to the Phillies. But these are guys that were potentially going to impact this team in the near term. Kyle Stowers, a good defender in all 3 outfield spots, could be used in center in a pinch. And Connor Norby, who just came up from the minor leagues, hitting 188, but in a tiny, tiny sample size, just turned 24 years old, can play a little bit in the outfield, can play second base. And for a team that just traded away Austin Hayes, who's a right-handed bat, this team definitely is in need of some right-handed bats. Stowers is a lefty, but Norby's a righty. You're giving away some of your current depth in order to get a starter. Starter is still an absolute need for this team, even after getting Zach Eflin. Maybe the Orioles think he's good enough, and I think he's good enough to start game 3 of a playoff series where you have Corbin Burnes and Grayson Rodriguez, and then you slot Zach Eflin in, and he delivered a quality start in his first Orioles start. They still needed some depth in that rotation. Still down John Means, still down Tyler Wells. You don't know how long you're going to be able to use Albert Suarez. He's in his 30s and hasn't pitched this much ever, really, in a long, long time. Dean Kramer has struggled with injuries throughout this season. You still could use some depth in that rotation that would let some of those starters, maybe like an Albert Suarez, be bumped to the bullpen. I just don't know if Trevor Rogers answers that for you. I don't think at this point, now maybe the Orioles pitching staff, maybe Chris Holt and Drew French will get him to the point where he is at that point. But I don't think right now he is good enough to start in a playoff game, certainly, and not good enough maybe even to come out of the bullpen. Hasn't really been used as a reliever throughout the course of his career. Has been a starter for every single one of his big league appearances. 80 starts this year, or 80 starts in his career, a 4.23 ERA, had just 4 starts last year, and is having a bounce back 21 start season this year health-wise, but the productivity is not there. 105 innings. He's approaching his career high, which was 133 in that all-star season in 2021. So you do worry about coming off a season in which he pitched just 18 games. Are you going to feel comfortable continuing to throw him out there? Are you going to feel comfortable stretching him out? That was a concern when the Orioles were rumored to be interested in White Sox starter Garrett Crochet. Is he going to be able to hold up over the long term? Is he going to be able to pitch in a playoff race in September? And is he going to be able to pitch in the postseason in October? Maybe the Orioles view Trevor Rogers as a reliever in this bullpen in big-time spots down the stretch. That was something they certainly miss in DL Hall. He came up big for them in September of last year, and the Orioles had made a deeper playoff run in 2023. DL Hall certainly would have factored into that. Trevor Rogers doesn't have the same kind of stuff. He doesn't have the same blistering fastball that DL Hall does. He doesn't even have above average stuff so far this season. His four-seam fastball averages just 92 miles an hour. Sinker averages 92. And then he's got a changeup and a slider. And all of those pitches so far this season, according to StatCast, have been below average. Now, what the Orioles are giving up in Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers is 2 guys who are homegrown, both guys who were drafted under the Mike Elias regime. Kyle Stowers came in the 2019 draft class. He was one of the very first draft picks that Mike Elias made, came out of Stanford, can play all 3 outfield positions, worked his way up through the minor league system, finally broke through at the end of the 2022 season, struggled with injuries, was hit in the head in 2023, was up and back, came up this year on Mother's Day and had a couple different stints with the Orioles so far this year. Just 19 games, was hitting .306 with a 797 OPS. There wasn't a whole lot of room for him in this outfield because Heston Kjerstad is up here and he's producing well. Colton Cowser, I should say, is up here. He's producing well as a left-handed outfield bat. So there wasn't necessarily a spot for him right now, but God forbid one of those guys goes down. Cedric Mullins goes down. Anybody else, you felt good about having Kyle Stowers here. Then what the Orioles are giving up in Connor Norby wasn't a top 100 prospect and was supplanted by Enrique Bradfield Jr. on the Orioles' top 5, according to MLB Pipeline, but somebody who was pretty coveted around Major League Baseball as a right-handed hitting second baseman and outfielder when need be. The Orioles drafted him early with their second-round pick in the same draft that they got Colton Cowser in. He's done nothing but produce at the minor league level. So far this season, in 80 games, he's hitting .297 down in AAA Norfolk with 16 homers. He's got crazy pop for a guy who doesn't even stand 6 feet tall, just turned 24 years old. That's a steep price in Norby and Stowers to be giving up for Trevor Rogers, somebody that I thought, the Orioles might target, but at a price tag that is a whole lot less for this than what the Orioles ended up giving up. John Mioli of the Baltimore Banner even suggested in an article that the Orioles would target Trevor Rogers and try to recapture some of the form that he had in his 2021 season with Miami, but not at this price tag. It's certainly a steep price tag to be giving up for somebody who has a 4.59 ERA and at this point probably will not factor into your postseason rotation and maybe not even to your postseason bullpen. Although I'm sure the Orioles hope that changes. The deal that John Mioli suggested on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, is that the Orioles would be giving up Matt Horvath, who they already gave up in the Zach Eflin deal, Cameron Weston, and Tavion Josenberger. Cameron Weston, Tavion Josenberger are not top 30 prospects in the Orioles system. Matt Horvath was the Orioles' number 10 prospect before they dealt him to the Tampa Bay Rays. So that return is a whole lot less than giving up your top 5 prospect in Connor Norby and a valuable 26-year-old big league outfielder in Kyle Stowers. I want to hear what you have to say as to this deal that sent Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers to the Miami Marlins in exchange for left-handed starter Trevor Rogers. Saw a comment from Chris that says trust Elias. Somebody saying, hoping that Suarez can become a more reliable player. That certainly is the hope at this point. Albert Suarez, though, I don't think factors into a postseason rotation. Could be used out of the bullpen, and maybe that this addition of Trevor Rogers helps that. And I will say the fact that Trevor Rogers is a lefty certainly helps the Orioles. We've seen how much their own lineup can get destroyed and dismantled and rearranged by facing left-handed starters. We saw that in the postseason when they faced the Texas Rangers. They faced left-handed starters in games 1 and 2. That forced Brandon Hyde and the Orioles to mix and match their lineup. Orioles are probably better to facing left-handers this season than they were prepared to last season. However, that's something that the Orioles might use as a changeup, and it's nice to have a left-handed starter in this rotation that is set to lose John Means in free agency, who is still, of course, recovering from Tommy John. Cade Povich is a lefty, but we've seen him struggle a little bit at the big league level. So that is nice. But other than that, there isn't a whole lot to go on for Trevor Rogers so far this season. Keep commenting along as we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I also did see the report, as Rock Kabako of MASNsports.com was the first to report about Terrin Vavra being on his way to Baltimore as a replacement. I'm not overreacting to this move. The natural move you'd think when Connor Norby is sent in a trade, you'd think Jackson Holliday would be the next guy up because Jackson Holliday plays second base right now. He can play shortstop if need be. It's a natural fit. I know Holliday is a lefty, Norby is a righty, but Holliday would seem to be the next man up. But instead, it's Terrin Vavra, whose name the Orioles fans haven't heard for several years, but he is somebody who has a little bit of big league experience, as you might recall, has played for the Orioles in games past, and will be probably utilized a little bit when he is initially called upon. However, I don't think he's going to be utilized a whole lot. He played 27 games last season for the Orioles at the big league level. We hit 245 with a 560 OPS. Struggled a lot with injuries so far this season. Has only played in 38 minor league games so far. 31 of those coming at Norfolk, where he's hitting 269 with an 800 OPS. Hits from the left side of the plate. To me, this is a move that the Orioles are temporarily making. I don't expect Terrin Vavra to be up here for the long term. I think the Orioles want somebody who has a little bit more big league experience, who's more ready to go right now to slot into the lineup. If he hits the cover off the ball, great, but I don't expect them to be relying too heavily on Terrin Vavra initially, and I don't expect him to be in the lineup a whole lot. We still have just 3 hours and 15 minutes before the MLB trade deadline at 6 o'clock, and our reporters are down at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, getting ready to go into the Orioles clubhouse and speak with the players. I am curious to hear what Brandon Hyde has to say about this move that acquired Trevor Rogers and sent Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers to the Marlins. And I'm also curious to see what the Orioles players do have to say as well. Where the Orioles go from here, though, they do have a lot of rotation decisions to make. We've already seen them have to go yesterday with using as many arms as possible in order to get through that doubleheader. They have Corbin Burns that they can use as your game 1 starter of a potential playoff series. Grayson Rodriguez, obviously. Dean Kramer is healthy right now. And Zach Eflin, who delivered a quality start in his first start for the Orioles. Then you'd think that Trevor Rogers probably slots in there as well. He will, at least to start for the latter 2 months of the regular season, will be a big-time starter. He will be relied upon as a starter in this rotation. Whether a move to the bullpen comes eventually, that'll probably be a more of a playoff decision. The Orioles now, though, I think after acquiring Zach Eflin and Trevor Rogers, are probably done on the starting pitching market, but there is still time if they want to get one more reliever. They acquired Seranthony Dominguez on Friday. They could yet still go out and get another reliever. Doesn't necessarily have to be a closer. I know Craig Kimbrell has undergone his struggles, and certainly last night he struggled as well. But they need probably one more reliever for this bullpen. Even after moving Albert Suarez, which is what we suspect, to the bullpen, they could probably use just one more arm in that bullpen. I thought maybe Tanner Scott of the Marlins might be somebody that they might target. Just because the Orioles have done one deal with the Marlins doesn't mean they can't yet do another in these remaining 3 hours. But it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens at this point. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Banner Baseball Show. Thanks for subscribing, and give us a like, give us a thumbs up, write us a good review anywhere that you are listening to your Banner Baseball Show podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, just $1 for 6 months. I'm going to head down to Camden Yards and hear what the players and Brandon Hyde have to say. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.